So today I'm going to talk about the context of this, what we're all living through, especially as healthcare leadership. We're going to identify what self-care means to each one of us. I'm going to show you and share with you a framework for self-care. And finally, we're going to talk about some strategies for improving self-care. And just heads up, I hope you have a paper and pen because we're going to do one little assessment at some point. So just have that ready with you. I don't know if this is familiar, but life, it always feels like we're being squeezed between our family needs, our parents, children, grandchildren. But now things have gotten tighter and more difficult because of COVID. A lot of us have new adjustments with families and the stress, especially, we have to remember in healthcare, it's very female dominated for the most part. And what schooling has meant for a lot of our colleagues and just managing all of that online learning, work, IPAC for most of us, regulations that keep changing every day, wear a mask, don't wear a mask when you enter, don't wear, throw it out. All the ministry directives that we had to live through in long-term care, issues with employees, issues with bosses, really work, issues with residents, patients, expectations. It's all really gone through the roof. And the other thing that I like to talk about is, everybody says we have a new normal. There's nothing normal about what we've been living through. I mean, really, if anything, COVID has created a new abnormal. Boundaries are blurred. Some of us are working from home, which means we're living at work. We've had increased numbers of hours and days on the job. I mean, for the first 4 to 6 months, it was weekends, it was nights, it was never knowing when you're going to be called for whatever crisis was going to happen. There's been constantly changing rules, situations that we've had to adapt to. And we've really worked in the most volatile sector. And I guess there's the Amber Alert happening right now. So we've, especially long-term care. I mean, healthcare altogether, but long-term care has been hit so hard. And I don't have to explain it to us what that means. But I just want you to be mindful that it's been so stressful and we've been so busy doing, and we haven't had much time to think about what's been happening. The other piece that we need to be aware is that we're all really grieving. Whether we talk about it as grieving or not, there's been a loss of control. There's a loss of order and routine and normalcy to our days. There's the loss of workplace connection and chit chat, the more mundane things that we did after a meeting. We all left together and talked about things. I don't know about you, but the days that I'm actually in the office and my colleagues we're all one next to each other, we're still meeting on Zoom. We're not meeting together. And there's really a loss of the energy that comes from being with other people in the same room, having coffee. And just acknowledging these losses is very important for our self-care. The other piece is, and I'm not going to talk about burnout because there's another presentation on burnout later on in the month, but one of the reasons we emphasize self-care so much is because we don't want to experience burnout. And remember, burnout is the feeling of extreme fatigue. That's how we sense it, as a response to overwhelming situations. So remember the word fatigue, because a lot of us just feel tired and we can't understand why we're so tired. So this presentation is about self-care, and self-care means so many different things to so many of us. And we all know this idea that when we're flying and they go through safety rules, when you're traveling with a dependent, you put yourself, the oxygen mask first, then to your dependents. And so I'm framing this in the context that really self-care is a priority and necessity. It's not a luxury. In the work that we do, we must take time to look after ourselves. And I want to go over some of the definitions around self-care because there's a lot of different definitions. And the way I look at it is it needs to be something that refuels us rather than drain us. So I don't consider brushing my teeth or flossing as self-care. And yes, it is self-care. I'm looking after my health. But I want you to look at self-care in the context of something that gives us energy, something that we want to do. So if I hate running, pushing myself to go for a run is not something I would want to do. So then that's not self-care for me. The other piece is self-care isn't selfish. We have to get that idea out of our heads. Self-care is knowing what we need to do in order to take care of ourselves, and we're all different. So what works for us? We also need to plan for it. It won't happen automatically. Unless we schedule, we know what we're going to do. It won't happen, and it's individual. And it also, most importantly, needs to be realistic, because I think we would all want to just about now call it a day and go away on vacation for 2 weeks. And I don't know where you work if you can, but it's been really hard to take time off for vacation. And so whatever we decide our self-care is going to look like, it needs to be something that we could actually do. The other piece I want to talk about is self-care. We have a lot of autonomy to do a lot of things to support ourselves, but we live within a context. And so that if our place of employment doesn't support our healthcare, if the policies don't support it because you're not allowed to take vacation time, you're not allowed to take weekends off, you're on call 24/7. If society, I mean, what we've seen with COVID is how it's affected women in a negative way. Because that's the context of society we live in. Even when children have two parents, it tends to be the mom that's been taking time, taking the brunt of overall of the school instruction for children. All these things matter. And easy for me to say, make sure you take time for yourselves. But when you're working 12-hour days, you have children to mind, there's the housework to do, bills to pay, and all the things that pile on our plate, self-care looks very different. And yet there's still ways to integrate it. But keep it in mind that there's a whole context around self-care. And there was actually a study done in 2014 by Warshawski and Havens, and it was out of the US. And it was close to 300 nurses in leadership positions. So these were people in leadership positions. And the study came about because the thinking was, why do so many people leave healthcare leadership with burnout rates? How could we improve self-care activities for healthcare leadership? And these were the things that were impediments to self-care. And any one of us, whether we're nurse leadership or not, could relate to this, especially during these times. There's a poor work and life balance. We have difficult workloads. There's limited or no access to stress reduction activities, especially during the workday. There's so many daily scheduled meetings. There's frequent emergencies that need immediate attention. There's feelings of guilt due to understaffing. So if over lunchtime, I say to myself, it's a gorgeous day here, like I really want to make a point of going out for a walk. If the staff, if there's not enough nurses on the floor or people where you are, it's very difficult to say to everybody, bye, I just need a 20-minute break to go for a walk when other people can't, right? There's also poor organization support for the most part, and really there's a lack of time. And I want to emphasize this lack of time because at the end of the day, if we focus on lack of time, we're not going to get anywhere. We all have a lack of time. So we're going to reframe the presentation differently instead of talking about time. And so the first thing that needs to happen is, this is such a truism, and yet it's so true, is you have to know yourself, what works for you. And for example, even, and I don't believe that our leadership styles are all that different than our personal styles. At the end of the day, we are who we are. So are you the kind of person that absorbs everybody's trouble, like SpongeBob, what's his name? SpongeBob, and collapses on the floor because we've taken everybody's issues? Or at the other end of it, are you the kind of leader or person that kind of keeps everything there? You protect yourself from all the issues and trouble, and you don't let anything touch you. Just things, you're like Teflon, like just people tell you things and off they go. Or more like, in an ideal way, is to let things, issues, people go through us. So we absorb part of it, but we don't keep it all. Because either these two extremes, SpongeBob or being like Teflon or not letting anything through us, is not going to work well for us in the long term. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with, I think it's Tony Schwartz and Catherine McCarthy's study, and it was in the Harvard Business Review, and it was in 2007, and it still remains very topical, and I really encourage you to read that article. But basically, what they were saying is time is a finite resource. We all have 24 hours a day. So where we need to spend focus and is more on our personal energy, which is renewable. It's what fuels us. And self-care is a way to refuel us. And this is something we have some control over. And so there are 4 sources of energy, according to this framework. And one is physical, one is mental, emotional, and spiritual. And even though here I made this graphic, that they're separate, we all know that they're not separate. Really, they all interrelate. But as a framework, it's perhaps easier to understand it as separate things. So what I'm going to do now is, and this is where I've asked you to have some paper and pen handy, is we're going to do a test to see your score, to see whether you're headed for an energy crisis. So we're going to focus in these 4 areas: your body, your emotions, your mind, and spiritual side. And I'm going to read statements, and you either tick them and count that as 1 point, and just keep track of it. So the maximum you could have at the end of this assessment is 16 points, because there's four statements per point. So I'm going to start, keep track of it. The first one for your body. If you agree with this, I don't regularly get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and I often wake up feeling tired. If you agree with this, you put a point, a tick mark. I frequently skip breakfast, or I settle for something that isn't nutritious. I don't work out enough, meaning cardiovascular training at least 3 times a week and strength training at least once a week. I don't take regular breaks during the day to truly renew and recharge, or I often eat lunch at my desk if I eat at all. So personally for me there, I have 3 points. The next one, about emotions. I frequently find myself feeling irritable, impatient, or anxious at work, especially when work is demanding. Next one. I don't have enough time with my family and loved ones, and when I'm with them, I'm not always really with them. The next one. I have too little time for the activities that I most deeply enjoy. And last one for emotions. I don't stop frequently enough to express my appreciation to others or to savor my accomplishments and blessings. And the last two categories, mind and spirit. For mind, I have difficulty focusing on one thing at a time during the day, especially just say email, and I'm sorry, I'm blocked here. I'm blocked, I'm saying I have something in front of my screen. I spend much of my day reacting to immediate crises and demands rather than focusing on activities with longer term value and high leverage. Third, I don't take enough time for reflection, strategizing, and creative thinking. And fourth, I work in the evenings or on weekends, and I almost never take an email-free vacation. And the last section is our spirit. I don't spend enough time at work doing what I do best and enjoy most. There are significant gaps between what I say is most important to me in my life and how I actually allocate my time and energy. My decisions at work are more often influenced by external demands than by a strong, clear sense of my own purpose. And I don't invest enough time and energy in making a positive difference to others or to the world. And so now what we're going to do is we have a poll coming up. Add up your points out of 16. And in your poll, start putting yourselves where your points were. So I can see it's happening. And we have about 53 people signed up. So ideally we should have those kinds of numbers. So wait one more minute. And as you can say, as the numbers are coming in, it's very clear that for most of us, we do not have excellent energy management skills. The majority of us are muddling through. A fair number of us are still could use some help. And 19% of us are really are in energy management crisis. And so this is helpful to know. So we could all benefit. So I think there's only one person that answered around that they're managing fine, and that's amazing. But look overall what's going on with all of us. So the other thing, and we're not going to do it now, but I just want you to keep in mind that you look at your scores based on which area of focus. So was it your body? So because some of us could be, you're looking after yourselves, you're exercising, you're sleeping enough. That's not an issue for you. But from a spiritual perspective, you're really drained. And this is just for your own knowledge to think about, where are the areas that I need to put a bit more emphasis on or work on. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the physical component of it. And here, I'm not going to spend too much time, mostly because I don't want to. We all know what we need to do. We all know we need to exercise. We all know we need to sleep. We all know that we need to eat nutritious food, and no amount of knowing changes our behavior. We have to be ready for that. But we really need to understand that if we don't look after ourselves physically, that affects our energy level. It affects our ability to manage one's emotions and focus. When I'm hungry, when I'm tired, I'm not thinking at my best. And for all of us, it's important to identify habits to increase our physical energy. And I use the word habits or rituals so that they become something that we do. It's not a one-off, but just like you brush your teeth when you wake up, you get up and go for a walk for 10 minutes or whatever that may be. And so it's also important for us to understand how our body speaks to us. So when we're restless, when we yawn a lot, when we're hungry, when we're having difficulty concentrating, we need to not disregard these signs. And so and when I say know yourself, is I know for me, my recharge for my body is running in the woods. I do this every weekend when I'm able. This was me on Sunday. To me, and again, when I say the physical and the spiritual and the mental are all in together, to me, this is my sanctuary, being in nature, running. So find what that is for you. The other piece of it is don't fight yourselves. There's a circadian rhythm. For most of us, it's similar, but not necessarily. We know that generally people from like 9 till 1, we're at our most productive and sharpest. Save those times for thinking, for important meetings, for things that need your concentration. And then for the afternoon, when generally we're lagging a bit and we're tired, if you can, most of us can't take a nap, that's a joke, but even go for a quick walk or something, leave things that you need your energy or your thinking cap on for later in the day. So use yourselves in that manner. For most people, after 5 is when our bodies, we're at a maximum body temperature, so it's a good time for exercise. For me, my time when I exercise is first thing in the morning. That works for me. But get to know how your body works and don't fight it. Don't fight yourself. In terms of mental, things that we can focus, multitasking, and we all do it. It's been shown over and over again that undermines productivity by 25%, yet we don't seem to be able to stop it. How many of us are in a Zoom meeting while we're texting or answering emails? It's helpful at the end of each day before you finish work, kind of figure out what's the most important challenge for tomorrow and make it a priority in the morning when you come in. And start your day with the most important tasks for the day. Try to reduce interruptions. You know, a lot of us will use through our link system. Just kind of, we let other people know that they're not going to be interrupted. Close your door in the office when you can. Schedule time for emails and return calls if you can. End of the day is a good time. I used to work with a psychiatrist who used to say, if you wait to return calls till the end of the day, most problems solve themselves by then. So automate as many decisions as you can. Delegate what you can. Do not ever make decisions when you're tired or hungry. And simplify your life. From a spiritual perspective, is we need to know ourselves, what matters to us overall. And really, this is something that we can only know. I mean, we need to be working in areas where we really feel that we make a difference. And I'm pretty sure that most of us in this call, there's a reason why we're in healthcare, and it's not because it's fancy, well paid. There's nothing about that, the work we do. Most of us, most of the time, find it meaningful, and that really helps. And do what you do best and enjoy most at work. So things that drain you, when you can delegate those things, delegate them and focus on your strengths. So for me, budgets is not my forte. I hate doing them. I hate thinking about them. There are other people that are much better on my team doing those things. I delegate that kind of stuff. So when you're able to find your strengths and focus more on those things, and also live your core values in your daily behavior. So if being considerate is a value for you, make sure that you're not late to meetings, because you consider being considerate of other people's times is important to you. And also devote time and energy to work, family, and health. And not one of those is any more important than the other. And finally, find your optimal way of being. Do activities you enjoy. activities that increase your effectiveness. And we all know what those would be. As I said, for me, it's running in the woods. For some of you, maybe spiritual, a place of worship, being with family, and this is why COVID's been especially so difficult for so many of us. And the last piece, and this is where I'm going to spend most of the presentation from now on, is the emotional part of it. Because at the end of the day, how we recharge emotionally makes a huge difference to how we view life and how we self-care. So I could do a whole presentation of awareness of our feelings and the impact of these emotions, and I wouldn't even have time in one session. But it's important to at least recognize which emotions, which events trigger negative emotions, so that at the end of the day, the goal is to gain control over our emotions. Our emotions will happen, but how we manage them is what's going to give us energy or make us feel really deflated and low. One way to do this is buying time. I always tell clients, count to 10. When you get this urge, this anger, this angst, you don't even know how you're feeling, just count to 10. When somebody throws something at our lap and you were like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, we feel stressed, I've become a lot better at saying, let me get back to you. I'm the kind of person that I'm always saying yes, always saying yes. And during COVID, it's gotten me into a lot of trouble because it's like never ending, the yeses and the demands. Let me get back to you gives us a little bit of control and ability to think things through, even if it's short term. Or you could say, I'll get back to you at the end of the day, or I'll get back to you at the end of the meeting. Buy yourself time and think about it. And lastly, for a lot of us that have done yoga for years and years, is box breathing. And we're going to try it now. I'm going to do it quickly with all of you. So just sit down comfortably on your chairs, and we're going to go through it. And generally, box breathing is to a count of 4. I personally do it to a count of 3 because I feel like I'm going to run out of breath, and some people go to a count of 5. But I'll practice it with 4, and we'll do it a few times. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding your breath for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for 4 counts again. And we haven't done it long enough, and all you need to do it for is sometimes just a minute or under. But this has the ability to change. So when we feel anxiety, when we feel agitated and our breathing starts happening, it's shallower and faster. This brings us back in a very quick way that nobody really has to know. And just really in 1 minute, it can change our patterns. Another way to increase our emotional state is really by increasing positive emotions. And it's easy to do. I use this a lot in my work. Express appreciation to others. It is not hard at all. It doesn't take long to call somebody and say, hey, thank you so much for handling that family that was so upset. I so appreciate it. And I really appreciate it because you really went out of your way to do it. So make it detailed and specific, why you're so happy and thankful. Send emails and call people. You will feel better and they will feel better. Gratefulness, we all know about this, but we know about it because it really works. And if you think at some point during the day what you're grateful for, there are a lot of people that do 3 things at night before they go to bed. Find ways to find positives. And again, it's attitude is what matters. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Harvard Developmental Study, and it's one of the longest studies around human development. And it's been shown that attitude, so making lemonade out of lemons kind of attitude, increases longevity. And this is something, we can't change our genes, our genetics, but we can learn to change our attitudes. So we have to be mindful. And if you're not aware of this, it's a Canadian website. It's called Fountain of Health. It's created by some psychiatrist. I can't remember. There's a few of them in the Atlantic provinces in Canada. It's terrific. It's really meant for older adults and middle-aged people around changing health, around positive psychology. But again, when you go through it, you'll realize it's not just let's feel positive and happy all the time. That's not only it's not good, but it's never going to happen. We all have emotions, but there are ways that it's really about self-help and self-care. So I really encourage you to check that out. And finally, around self-talk and reframing how we're thinking. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because this has the ability to help us change your attitude. And again, it doesn't take time. So I'm going to go through how do we talk to ourselves? How do we reframe our thoughts? Ways to really think differently of things that are happening to us as a way of self-caring for ourselves. So self-talk, this is easy. For example, pretend that you're your own best friend. What a concept to think of ourselves. We talk to ourselves in ways that we never talk to anybody else. So instead of saying, I can't believe I'm I'm so distracted and I'm a horrible manager. It was, it was so-and-so's birthday. She told me yesterday and I totally forgot. I can't believe it. And I wanted to be there for her. Instead of thinking like that, be kind to yourselves and say something like, I'm doing the best I can. Or what I'm doing would be hard for anybody. I'm not perfect, but that's okay. I can't control some things that happen. And sometimes I just need to do what works for right now. So again, try to shift the way that you talk to yourselves. You talk to yourself as you would talk to a friend. The other thing is, I just want to share some strategies with you about reframing your thoughts. Because we know that how we think affects how we feel, and we are not our thoughts. So, a typical one, we're driving into work, we're on the highway, somebody cuts us off, we're furious, and we're like, who do they think they are? They think they're more important than us. They cut me off. It could have caused an accident. Oh my God. And we just, at the end of the day, we just get our, heart rate starts going up. We just get all upset. We can do something called assume positive intention, or API. And so what we could do instead, as somebody cuts us off, we can say, I bet that person is not from this part of town, and she didn't know that the exit for the highway was on the left side, not the right side. Luckily, she found it. And so whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It just means we are less agitated. The person didn't do it to us intentionally when they cut us off. And in the end, we continue on our drive, listening to our podcast and being happy instead of being irritated. That is self-care. Another thing is something like changing your labeling. So we do one thing, and so we decide, for example, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I can't return the emails. And all I think is, I am so lazy. I can't believe I don't have the energy to do this now. Being more compassionate with ourselves would be something like, I'm not lazy. I've been working so hard. Even I need a break sometimes. Or sometimes we tend to take responsibility for things that are negative, that occurrences that happen that are totally beyond our control. So for example, you blame yourself when your organization runs out of vaccines and staff and family are angry with you. How come she got it, I didn't get it, and this person didn't get it, and you take it personally. But a more compassionate response would be, not having enough vaccines has nothing to do with my ability to plan for the well-being of this institution. When there are not enough vaccines, it is out of my control. The province manages vaccine allocation. And just think of shifting how, for us, think of it differently, changes the way we feel about ourselves. Another thing is when we jump to conclusions, and we can do this by, we think we're mind readers. So for example, we think somebody's thinking negatively about us. And so, for example, your boss doesn't return a phone call and you assume that they're ignored. He or she's ignoring us. A better response, a more helpful response would be, I don't really know what my boss is thinking. And for all I know, she didn't get the message. Maybe she's really busy, or maybe she just forgot. I want to know what she's thinking. And if I want to know it, I will have to ask her. So we don't assume, or fortune telling, predicting the future. You really predict a negative outcome in the future. For example, I don't think he's going to help me with that project. There's no chance. However, we don't know the future, and I don't think he's going to help me, but unless I ask him, I'm not going to know. And finally, this idea of overgeneralization and discounting the positive. So when we overgeneralize, so we go to work, we start our car, the battery's dead. And it's like you go, oh my God, this stuff always happens to me. Something always goes wrong. A better, more compassionate response would be, this doesn't really happen all the time. And usually my car's working fine. And at times, things don't happen the way I want them to happen, but most of the time they do. And finally, discounting the positives. So this idea that we can't let ourselves feel good about things that happen. So you were dreading this meeting, you thought there'd be a lot of conflict, you were chairing the meeting, and at the end of the day, the meeting, you thought, it went okay, but I could do better. Or, anybody could have ran that meeting as well as I could. And really, a more compassionate response would be something like, working in healthcare is not easy. It takes courage. It's hard. I'm not always perfect, but I really do a lot, and I'm trying to be helpful. So all these examples are examples of things we can do, constantly do, just reframe our thinking. The other thing is practice both and thinking. So things are not either or. I'm not all good or all bad, or either it's a horrible day at work or a good day at work. Good things can coexist. So personally, I can say I'm both a manager with accountabilities, but I'm a person with my own needs as well. One doesn't negate the other. I am both sad of how COVID has affected my life and happy that my son lives at home because of it. I'm both down about the lost hopes and dreams I had for 2020, and I'm happy about some new plans and goals. And here you can add your own examples. And really, the more you use this way of thinking, the easier it'll come to you. Also, setting boundaries. Know your limits so that you could set boundaries at work. Be direct with people so that people are not confused by what you mean. Create a schedule that suits your preferences and try to keep things as normal as possible, even when we're operating under crisis conditions. So for me, I'm a morning person. When initially during COVID, we had to help support the entries to do screening, and we were all kind of redeployed, I didn't pick the night shift or the afternoon and late dinner shift. because that would be brutal for me. But I picked the 6 to 2 in the morning, 6 a.m. I'm a morning person. That works for me. So we're still doing our part, but taking into account, and there were people that loved the night shift because basically meant they were at night, there weren't that many people coming in and out of Baycrest. And during the day, they could take a break and sleep and do whatever else, right? So know yourself. And if possible, when you're working from home, try to do your work in a different space. So initially I was in my living room. And so I never left. My laptop and all my equipment was like right there. And every time I went to the kitchen, it was like, oh my God, I have to return those emails. I have to do this. I have to do that. I moved to a separate room now where I keep the door closed. So when I'm not in work mode, I am not working. Some things we can do. Instead of checking your phone in bed, take a deep focused breath at night before falling asleep. Instead of staying up late, wake up earlier and do something that you like you can walk the dog, go for a run, whatever moves you. Instead of answering emails and stay on Slack 24/7, create boundaries. You can tell your staff, I'm available on email or Slack or by phone till 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever works for you. But tell people, if you send me something after this time, I will not be answering it. Instead of working like a hermit and become a recluse, make connections with others. Scrolling on your phone is not a way to recharge. You know, there's a saying that says, recharge yourselves as much as you charge your phone, right? So we're good, you know, we reboot our computers constantly when they're not working. We recharge our phones. Why can't we do that with ourselves? And so really, instead of reading social media, really engage in true leisure instead of what we call compensatory leisure. So reading social media, which aggravates us and makes us hyper and anxious, is not a way to recharge ourselves. Find what that is for you. And be compassionate with yourself, like we had those examples before, and not just with yourselves, but with others. And for me, use imagery that moves and speaks to you. So I'm really into mountains. As I said to you, I'm really into the outdoors. I have images that refuel me. So hiking up mountains, spending the whole day outdoors is what does it for me. I have this picture by my desk, mostly because I remember how scary that day was in Yosemite climbing. I was petrified, and I did it, and I got through it. And when I got to the top, I was a little bit scared. It was like you don't want to do a misstep there, but I was proud of my accomplishment. And that reminds me, in my mind, I use this imagery to say, Adriana, when I'm feeling like I'm no good, I did this wrong, oh my God, it's overwhelming, I think of myself as somebody with grit. I got through it. A lot of people were coming down the mountain. I still persevered. And I'm proud. So I know I've got that in me. I've got that grit. So use those kinds of things to help you. And again, this whole idea, we cannot pour from an empty cup. We matter. We need to really make an effort to help ourselves.